Our speaker today is no stranger to many of you. He is Scott Huber, and he has come to many of our meetings to announce job openings with his company. He is the Director of Talent Strategy with Liaison Creative Plus Marketing. I'm not sure if that's how they speak it. He is going to be talking about insider tips for landing your dream job, or how not to annoy recruiters and hiring managers. Good advice for everyone. Scott is as I said, Director of Talent Strategy. Liaison Creative Plus Marketing is an Austin original with a 30-year presence, working with Fortune 500 marketing teams like Dell, those at Dell, AMD, Silicon Labs, 3M, Lenovo, NXP Semiconductor, National Instruments, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. LCM builds marketing teams or supplements current teams with full-time, full benefits employees. They also have the LCM studio that provides creative services on a contract basis. Scott's prior experience include establishing creative operations in publishing, working as a consultant with National Geographic School Publishing, building teams, and working at Dell with the industrial design team. In addition, he volunteers with various job clubs to provide job seeker advice and is on the advisory board at Austin Community College for graphic media production. I will waste no more time. Let's get into his presentation. Give a warm welcome to Scott Huber.
Thank you, Kathy. Let me share my screen here. Well, thank you, Kathy and Shannon, for providing this platform for Liaison to share. It's an amazing program that you guys have. Launchpad Job Club provides so many resources for job seekers, and you guys are such an incredible resource for the community, and I'm happy that we're able to piggyback on that and provide some tips for you today. It's kind of funny, I was talking with Shannon last week, and I changed the title of the presentation from how not to annoy recruiters to how we can help collaborate and have a relationship. So I got a little bit more positive as we moved through the week. So, so as Kathy said, I've been with Liaison Creative Marketing for 9 years. It's a really interesting story. Dave Klaunch, who is our president and founder, has set the company up, and it's been running for 30 years. I actually hired Liaison Creative back in like 25 years ago when I was in educational publishing to do some design and production work for us. So it's really kind of great to be full cycle with them. And as Kathy said, our jobs are full-time ongoing with a lot of the big tech companies. However, we work with in-between companies as well. And sometimes we do have contract jobs that are shorter, like David is working with us right now with NXP Semiconductor. So we do have a really interesting model. And our studio also provides services for marketing as well. And then Karen and I hire freelancers, but we also hire full-time ongoing individuals for our teams as well. And we supplement teams or we build them from scratch. And we're a little bit different because we don't have individuals just waiting in the wings to deploy. So we basically bake fresh with every single job that we have. We conduct intake, we do the client research, we do the job posting, we do the interviewing, we do the passive searches, and we do the onboarding. So we do the full life cycle and have been doing it for a really long time and specialize in that MarCom space, marketing communication, which is design, production, project managers, coordinators, people doing translations, and anything related to social media within the marketing space. My background is pretty much related to doing a lot of interviewing and building teams. And what I'm going to share with you today are tips from the talent strategy or recruiting team that I think will help you out. And let me just take a minute here to say that I understand that many of you might be in challenging situations right now, and that a job search can be really an emotionally challenging journey. And I've been there myself. I mean, I found myself needing to look for a job after I worked in educational publishing for 24 years. And it's a really, it's a hard spot to be. So what I'll share with you today are some tips I think that will help you out. So I get it. I know what it's like to be a job seeker. So I also want to share with you that on the recruiting side, it is actually a pretty emotionally charged job. It can be emotionally draining as well, as we work to find that solution for our client, find individuals who are qualified, individuals that are at the right place in their career, right pay level, skill set. So from the recruiting side, it also is a pretty deep emotional investment. But I also understand that at the end of the day, we get to start over and come to work the next day. So that level of stress and anxiety that we have is there, but it's not the same level as a job seeker. But I just want to make that note about recruiters are human. However, sometimes there are job applicant scanning systems that make them feel like they are not human. So just wanted to make that statement. These tips that I'm providing are in chronological order as a job seeker. And I encourage you to ask questions along the way. Kathy and Shannon will be checking the job board. Karen is online here as well, and she can help answer questions. So please don't feel like you can't interrupt and ask a question in the moment in time here. So let's get started. So approach recruiters with an open mind. And the reason I say that is that there are different recruiting models out there. So at Liaison, we only recruit for jobs that we have funded from an employer and that we have a job description. We don't work on spec. So if someone says, hey, we might have a job coming up, we don't engage individuals for that. We only work on jobs that are live and present and funded. And maybe you've worked with recruiters in the past where that wasn't the case. Maybe they're working on spec, and that's okay. Sometimes we will hear from one of our companies that they're going to be needing a project manager in a couple of weeks, but they don't have the budget or the job description formulated just yet, which is okay. So, but just know that, it's different recruiting methodologies with different companies. So be open-minded when you work with each of those different recruiting companies. And we want to be friendly and we want to make you comfortable. I mean, our job is not to make you feel uneasy. Like, Karen and I are not going to ask you in an interview how many ping pong balls fit into a jumbo jet liner, right? I mean, we like candidates who have good critical thinking skills, but we're not here to make you feel uncomfortable. If you're a right fit, we want to keep this conversation moving forward. But also know that we don't work for the candidate. We work for our company and we're working with our client, and we're trying to find that trifecta, right? The fit for you and Liaison, the fit for Liaison and our client, and the client and you. So sometimes candidates get confused and they think we're headhunters and that we're going to find them a job. The jobs we have are the ones that are posted, and that's the ones that we're recruiting on. So again, as you work with different firms, step back and really think about what their model is or how they work. Recruiters are assessing your actions and your responses and professionalism and your engagement along this journey. And that's such a key point today to really get across, that your engagement and how you present yourself consistently across the board is going to add up to a cumulative experience with the recruiter. And we have something called red flags, right? I mean, if there's something that kind of falls off to the wayside, or you're not responding or acting professional, you're going to start building red flags, and maybe your resume moves a little bit lower in the pile. So think about that overall experience that you're presenting. So my insider tip for you is it's okay to ask that recruiter, if you do have an exchange with them, what role they play in the process. What can they expect from you in this experience? What is the connection the company has with the client they're working with? Do they have access to really what the budget is? And are they actually in a position to make a hiring decision? So those are all good questions that are okay for you to ask. Next one is, do your research and pay attention to the application process. I know that, Kathy, you talk about this a lot, that you have probably applied for a lot of jobs like I've applied for a lot of jobs when I was a job seeker. If I reach out to you and set up an interview, whether it's phone or video, usually we send some information in advance. But if we're in a conversation and I ask you, hey, so what do you know about Liaison? And you say, well, I haven't had a chance to check you out, or you're going to find me a job, right? Those are all pretty big fails right off the bat. So do some research and keep track of your jobs. And I think that can get really confusing, all the number of jobs that you've applied for. But do your research and then keep a list of companies that you've applied for. Don't gloss over the job requirements. So if you see something that says must have or required, chances are those are going to be pretty important skills or experiences to have. Now, companies will actually ask us to find Bigfoot riding a unicorn, right? They want us to find the perfect candidate who has all these extra skills. Oftentimes, the years of experience can be negotiable. If you have the experience, but maybe you don't have the 5 years we're looking for, but you have the 3 years, then we might be able to continue the conversation. So just know that if you have the skills, but maybe not all the years, if you put the pieces together, it could be that you can get a conversation with the recruiter. Follow the steps of the application process. Our process is really simple. Attach your resume, what's your name, how did you find us, what's your LinkedIn. And we also have an opportunity where we say, how does this opportunity fit you? And it gives you a chance almost to have your own little mini cover letter, something that will separate you from other candidates. And it's kind of a little test to see who's going to invest, who's going to put some statements in there that will connect the dots for us. And it's kind of funny because a lot of times what we'll get in that box is, how does this opportunity fit you? We'll get someone that says, see my resume, or I'm the perfect fit, or I've wanted to be a designer for a long time and I can see myself in this job. So those are probably not the best use of that particular piece of our application. But if there are aspects of an application where you can enhance or toot your horn, take that advantage and time to do so. Insider tip here is, impress the recruiter with the knowledge of the company that you are applying for. So if you do get a chance to talk with them, like I said earlier, do your research, use that information in your conversation to let them see that you're a serious job seeker by having looked at the company. So connecting the dots for the recruiter. So key here is make it easy for that recruiter to see how your experience fits. Now, I can tell you that recruiters are not lazy. We do not work 9 to 5. We're constantly checking our emails. In fact, sometimes it's like Christmas morning when you open up your email and there's that perfect candidate who's applied for the job. But we're constantly on, always working. But don't make us guess how you're a fit for that opportunity. There's really no time in the process for the recruiter to be that detective and build the bridge from your experiences to the job itself. So when I was a job seeker, I had a 4-page resume, and I think it was even 10-point type. I mean, it was tiny, and I thought it was the best thing in the world that an employer could just pick the little pieces apart, like a sushi menu, and they could build the perfect candidate, and that would be me. But what I realized later is that I was really making their job hard. I was not bringing to the top how I was a fit for that opportunity. And this is really, really important. And I know you hear this at job clubs all the time, but create a targeted summary at the top of your resume. And I'm not talking about an objective. I know what your objective is. Your objective is to get a great job, pay benefits, be part of a team, and make a difference, right? This is an executive summary or a summary with targeted bullets that match to the job posting itself. Because what is a job posting anyway? It's nothing more than an employer saying, hey, I've got a problem. I don't have enough people doing this job. I don't have anybody doing this job, or the person doing the job is not very good. And the more effective you can be at connecting those dots with that summary, the better off you'll be. And that 1/3 of your resume, that top part of your resume, is super valuable real estate. And as a recruiter, as we look at these things, if I see terms that I've used in my job posting, or if I see connections with experience that you've helped highlight, it's going to get my attention. So that's a really, really key point. Underneath each job that you have listed, the more you can make that content be descriptive about what you've done, and Kathy's talked about this, the CAR, right? Challenge, action, results-based content, the better off you're going to be. So if you're a project manager and your first bullet says to me, responsible for making sure projects were on time and on budget. And my response to that is, okay, I hope so, because you're a project manager, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Unpack that, talk about the size of the team, the number of projects that you managed. Everything doesn't have to be CAR-based, but it should not sound like a job description. And again, there's tons of information out there on how to create those targeted points. If getting a job is your goal, then you may not be a candidate. And I say job versus career opportunity. Most people can get a job anywhere, but if you're looking for a career opportunity, that's what recruiters are interested in learning. Why are you a fit for this opportunity? We want to know that you're going to be a fit for a while, because we all know the cost of retraining an individual is astronomical. And so we want to make sure we have a right fit. Insider tip here is create a library of bullets that you can use in your summary. Maybe you create 10 or 15 of them. And you don't put 10 or 15 at the top, but what you'll do is you'll use those as a library that as you apply for different jobs, you can cherry pick the ones that fit. And like I said, these are targeted, non-generic items. And some of them you will customize towards the job you're applying. But chances are, if you create a library, you're going to be reusing some of them on a reoccurring basis. So it's not that heavy to lift. But if you have that ready to go, it'll be evident to the recruiter. We see so many generic resumes. It's like, did this person even really look and see what the job is, because there's no connection. So do what you can do to connect those dots. Any questions yet? I'm going to pause for a second. Are we good?
You're good. Nobody's posted anything in there.
All right, because everything's perfect. Okay, good deal.
Correct.
Every detail counts, right? It's this cumulative experience. There's not one thing that might get you kicked out of this conversation. Well, there are things that will get you kicked out of the conversation, but usually it's a cumulative experience. We don't expect resumes to be, 99% perfect, right? So it's a cumulative experience. So these are things that you've all heard before, but before this presentation today, guess what I was doing? I was reviewing resumes, and I found 3 of the 4 things here on my list this morning, right? So spelling errors. If I find a spelling error, that's really, really bad, because I'm a horrible speller. And Jody Paul, I think you're on. She's our proofreader at Liaison. So, get other people to look at your resume. Get other people to look at it. Formatting inconsistencies. We don't expect you to be a designer. But if your bullets are all wonky and your dates are all because you tabbed and spaced and it's just, okay, we'll give you benefit of the doubt. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, when we're making that final decision, we may look at who's paid the most attention to their overall presentation. There are so many tools out there now that you can use to craft a resume, Canva and Google and Indeed and all that kind of stuff. We will ask you for edits to your resume. We will not touch your resume. We will not edit it. I will not change the design. That's taboo for us. But if you don't know how to make an edit quickly because I want to submit your resume because Canva doesn't do something, just think about your ability to be somewhat of a craftsperson with the tool that you used for your resume, because you may have to make edits. LinkedIn, you've heard this all along. What recruiters do is we look at the resume, and then what I do is I immediately jump over to LinkedIn, because I don't want to see what you look like. I don't care what you look like. I want to see that you have a good photo. But what I want to see is, was there additional job experience that's relevant to what we're looking for? And sometimes resumes are shorter, which is good, and you don't have to put everything on there, but we'll help connect the dots that way. So make sure that you have consistency with your dates on your LinkedIn and on your resume. Oftentimes I'll see a huge disconnect with the dates, and I'm not sure what's going on. And is it your ability to pay attention to detail? Because again, it's that cumulative presentation. Communications, again, we'll talk about this in just a minute, but consistency in your email, tone, formatting. Video, as we've moved to this total virtual world, some computer manufacturers have made it hard for us. My camera is at the top, my wife's camera is at the bottom of her bezel, which is a really weird spot. But that human to human connection, we want to see eye contact. So if you're looking off while you're talking to me because your camera's over there, that's not going to feel right. So make sure that you really check out your setup. Also try to minimize distractions in what we call the interview zone, right? I mean, I love kids and dogs and snakes and birds, but if they're constantly interacting with us during our conversation, that's going to maybe take away from our ability to focus on what it is that we really want to focus on. And I've got a little bit of a funny story about that in just a minute. And then sign in early. I mean, there are hiccups with technology. Restart your computer before you have a video conference. Sometimes that's a good tip. References. Karen, I don't know, it seems like we're having challenges with candidates these days, providing references that are current and up to date. And that should be a no-brainer. References don't have to work at the same company that you used to work for. They can have moved on, but have a list of people that you kind of stay in touch with and that will respond quickly. So my insider tip on this is, look at all the elements that you have control over. Go back and do that extra set of eyes on your resume and on your LinkedIn. I mean, are you using a period after sentences or not? If you're mixing it up, make it consistent. So here's my little funny story. Quite a few years ago, I think it was the day before Thanksgiving. It was relatively slow at work. This is pre-COVID. And I was talking with a candidate, and she had a really great portfolio and a really awesome resume and set of experiences. And I was like, hey, why don't you come on into Liaison? Let's have a face-to-face. And she's like, well, I'm house sitting right now. I'm taking care of a friend's house, and I want to make sure I take care of everything. I'm like, hey, totally cool. I don't want you to have any issues or concerns. If you can come in, great. She goes, yeah, you know what? Let me think about it, and I'll come in the next hour. I was like, okay, great. So she comes in, and it was pretty cold out, and she had a scarf on, and her scarf was moving a little bit. I was like, are you okay? And she says, yes. And she pulled a chicken out of her scarf. And she was at her friend's house watching the chickens. And this little chicken was getting picked on, and she didn't want this little chicken to be left alone. So she brought a little chick to the interview, which was totally cool, and it didn't throw us off. And I thought it was neat that she was, such a great person watching her friend's house. But so at Liaison, we're capable of interviewing poultry and candidates. So we're very diverse.
I had a quick note.
Yeah.
Back to LinkedIn really quick. It may be common sense, but it just happened to me recently with one of the other recruiters on our team. In paying attention to details, we had someone accidentally link the wrong LinkedIn account to their application in our system. So just double check everything before you hit submit. Because again, to Scott's point, yes, we're all human and we all make mistakes, of course, but it's the total package,
No, that's a good point. And again, back to making it easy for the recruiter, I would say half the hyperlinks we get are broken or don't work, or your email is not hyperlinked, or your LinkedIn is not set up as a hyperlink. And it's not a big deal for us to have to copy and paste and go. But I mean, if you're thinking about making it easy for that person to learn about you, those are really good things to try to do. So stay professional and competitive. We have something called the friend zone, that maybe we've talked about a hobby that we have in common, or we worked at the same company, or maybe we know someone through LinkedIn, which is really cool. And we want to be friendly, yes, but we're not quite friends yet. And so what I'll see happen is that people will let their guard down And I'll have other people that are more focused on building that relationship and staying focused on what it is that we need from each other, as opposed to thinking just because we have a common thread that they have a foot in the door. So be careful about the friend zone. Kind of on the casual side as well, keep the salutation on email. I mean, it's important to address the individual by their name. I understand people have jobs and you need to be truncated in your communication. I totally get that. At Liaison, we offer to meet early in the morning, after work, or during lunch if you are working. But if I ask you, hey, what times are you available for an interview, and you send me an email that just says 2 Thursday, it's like, okay, so put a little effort into it. Don't share too much personal information. This is a huge red flag. I mean, I've had people share their financial situation with me, their medical situation, their personal status of their relationship, their age. Those are all things that make recruiters incredibly uncomfortable, because you start moving into areas of HR violation. And so be really sensitive about that. We don't need to know any personal information about you whatsoever. So just, don't throw that out there as hopefully a sympathy card that someone is going to actually then connect with you and give you a job. In fact, probably the opposite will happen. So, yes, Austin is casual. I mean, I've had people on video interviews with wrinkled t-shirts and sweatpants. Again, I don't necessarily care what you're wearing, but if you're not showing up, presenting yourself in a way that is going to be conducive to us working with Fortune 500 companies. I mean, Austin is casual, yeah, but you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. So you should really think about how you're showing. You don't need to wear a suit and tie or a pantsuit, but just think about your overall presentation, which really, again, gets to this point that we like to make, that it's your cumulative brand, right? It's your resume, it's your LinkedIn, it's how you show up on your conversations, your emails, it's all that stuff. I mean, competition is tight. It is a job seekers market right now. In fact, there's more jobs than qualified individuals. So, I mean, the advantage is on your side. So even more so than ever, pay attention to your overall presentation. Be an engaged candidate. And by that, we mean if a recruiter reaches out to you, they're interested, at least initially, right? So you have their attention. So respond quickly as possible. Check all of your communication channels. And it's really gotten to be kind of almost too much, right? You've got your watch and your iPad and your phone and your email. And I understand it's grueling keeping up to date with all those communication channels. But what we find at Liaison is sometimes our emails go into junk mail because of aggressive spam. And so I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn. And if I never hear back from you, because I'm assuming if you're a serious job seeker, you're on LinkedIn, I'll text you, or maybe I'll leave you a voice message. We have candidates that say, well, I never check my voicemail, or I never check my LinkedIn. So if you are a serious job seeker, you'll be checking all of those things. Again, I understand you may have a job and you can't respond immediately, but at least know that you should be checking a lot of those different communication channels. Be available. We work with a lot of managers and directors as clients. And oftentimes we need to reach out to you and find out when you're available. And if you can, to the best of your ability, provide as much of an open schedule as you can so that we can accommodate the client's schedule. Again, I know if you're working, you may have limited times, but the more options you can provide us, the better off you'll be to get that interviewing slot. So the insider tip here is check your junk mail. Also check your voice messages. Just be attentive to your communication channels. It could actually literally put you ahead of the group. I've reached out to a hero candidate, love them, have everything I'd really like to move forward, but they never get back with me. And then I move to the next person. So, don't lose out just because of these little simple things. So be honest and read your audience. And when I say honest, I know that there are jobs out there that you may have left. Maybe you left not on your own accord. And that's understandable. I mean, not every job is a fit for everybody. And we know that. I mean, like I said earlier, recruiters are humans. We've had jobs that maybe weren't a fit and had to leave. So if we have to dig a lot about that, and because you're not answering the question directly, that will send some red flags about your ability to be transparent. But we know that not every single job works out, or there are gaps in the resume, and that's totally fine. But just be straightforward. Read your audience. I think humans want to fill in the gap, right? And they're always looking to get the information in quickly, right? And our advice to candidates is slow down, step back, let the interviewer set the stage. You've heard this tip before, is you want to kind of mimic their cadence. If they're fast paced, you want to kind of be fast paced. The more laid back, you want to be a little bit laid back. But put your listening ears on and see what it is that they're looking to learn about you. Is it more soft skills? Is it about your resume and your transition from different jobs? Is it the hard skills? So step back and really take those active listening actions. And also answer questions pretty directly and efficiently if you can. I don't need 17 minutes of buildup for you to answer a question. So really think about what they're asking and then answer it directly. And also think about what's important to you in your next opportunity. I mean, we know having benefits and having a regular paycheck is important. But aside from that, why are you a fit? Why is this connection to this opportunity something that's going to be right for you and will be something hopefully that will be long-term? I mean, we're equally as interested in what's important to you as you hearing from us and what's important from us. So the insider tip here is be interested in the company and the job. We already know you're interesting because that's why we reached out to you. So be interested and let that be demonstrated by the research you've done about the company.
Scott, may I ask you a question at this point?
Yeah,
About that, be honest about the situation of past jobs.
sure.
If you were in a situation where a company wanted you to do something that you didn't feel was ethical, or
Yeah.
if you were in a situation that involved bullying or
Mhm.
sexual harassment of some
Mm.
sort, where you really don't want to talk about
Mhm.
those negative things about a previous company,
Sure.
is it enough to just say it wasn't a good fit for me? Or if somebody says it wasn't a good fit, then are you likely to say in what way?
Sure. Yeah.
So how do you avoid those details?
Yeah, no, really good question. I mean, you could say it was an unhealthy environment. It was an unhealthy work environment. Now, if you talk about anything deeper than that, then it does, you don't want to ever trash your previous employer, as horrible as they were or may have been. But I think it's perfectly okay to say that, it was an unhealthy work environment, that their values and morals were not aligned with mine. And I didn't realize that until after I started. And so I felt it was best if I just moved on. I think most recruiters, HR people, or managers will understand that there are some companies that are challenging to work with. And I think it's okay. But if you were fired for cause and you told me that you decided it wasn't a good fit and you decided to move on, and then later we find out that, you were let go because, or if you did something to be let go, that's the part I'm talking about. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. That unhealthy environment is a great line.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
no, yeah, it is. And it's, it's hard to admit. It's hard to say that you were let go from a job. No one ever wants to admit that. But, again, just as we're saying, hey, pump it up, it's the complete package. If you're transparent with me, and that's part of the complete package. And I know, certain jobs may not work out. So, but yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Prepare thoughtful questions, just like Kathy did. It was a thoughtful question. Generate a list of questions in advance. Now, our interviews are usually 30 minutes, maybe 45, and probably a lot of the questions about the day-to-day and what you can expect will be answered. So it's not like you need to write down every single question. But what may happen is that you may forget about some of the really good questions that you want to ask the company that may be a little bit more outside of the job. So write them down. You might forget them. I personally have a little bit of a challenge if someone's taking notes while I'm talking, because I feel like we've broken the communication conversation here. But if that works for you, that's fine. But have some notes written down and have or questions written down. Consider open-ended questions as well, because I think those are better than saying, "Hey, Scott, do you like working at Liaison?" It's like, Yes. And maybe you could say, hey, Scott, what's compelling about being part of the liaison team? It's not trying to be, super fancy with your language, but just show that you've been thinking about the types of questions that might give you insight and what it's like to be part of that organization. And so that's really kind of demonstrating your knowledge of the company by asking questions maybe that you saw in the news, if they have a new product release, or maybe they're breaking into a new market space, or maybe they're facing challenges. And the candidates who have well-crafted questions, I put them at a little bit higher level. I've chatted with you for 30 minutes in an interview. I get to the end and I ask if you have any questions. You've never worked with me before. You've never done this job. Maybe you've never even known this company. And after 30 minutes, you say, nope, I think you've answered everything. It's like, okay, I don't know how that could be possible, but recruiters want to have that exchange of conversation. Following up, I know this is always a challenge because you may not have the contact information with the individual you're working with, but recruiters do get busy. If you do have their contact information, a follow-up email after a couple of days is in order. And sometimes it's welcome. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about that. I did mean to get back with you. In fact, it might be the thing that sets you apart from others. And that follow-up conversation really is like, hey, Scott, I just wanted to see if there's any additional information you needed for you to know more about my experience, as opposed to saying, did you make a decision yet on if I'm going to get hired, right? So, think about how you can present a question, but it's okay to follow up. Don't pester that hiring manager or HR team by sending them emails every day. Just think about a decent cadence in which you can send off that email. If you do get to an interview stage, whether it's phone, video, on-site, it's really good to send a thank you note to the person who helped facilitate that or the person who you spoke with. So sending them an email, thanks for your time. Let me know if there's any additional questions I can answer for you. It's just it's the good human thing to do. In fact, I have some clients that is the tipping point. If you do not get a thank you note from someone that you've interacted with, that demonstrates what it's going to be like to work with them. And so, obviously it needs to be a genuine thank you note, but, think about the overall human experience as well as you're working with recruiters. Insider tip here is if you get a voicemail or email or any correspondence from a recruiter, we understand you're busy. We understand that you may not be able to respond immediately. But the thing to do is at least respond, hey, Scott, I've got your email. I'll get back to you by the end of the day. At least acknowledge you've got the correspondence because, again, that's actually going to demonstrate what it's going to be like to work with you. It's like, oh, wow, they're really on top of it. So just a little tip of acknowledging correspondences. So what can you do now? Kathy's already talked about, after this session, they're going to have interviewing things that are going on. There's other job clubs that produce or provide career coaching. And I would say, reach out to those groups and take advantage of all of those resources that are available. Step back and take a fresh look at your resume. Like I said, look at the periods, look at the formatting, look at everything from a consistent standpoint. Create that summary of bullets. Again, you don't need to work all day on this and labor over where the comma goes in that particular bulleted item, but start getting that library if you don't have one. If you haven't taken inventory of what's really important to you in your next job, write those things down. Recruiters want to know that. Kathy, I think, alluded to this earlier too about interviewing sessions that you guys might have later, is if you are struggling with answers to challenging questions from an interviewer or about your own personal history, get that stuff written down, feel comfortable and confident with it. And that way, when you do present your narrative, it'll be something that feels natural for you. It can feel uneasy and uncomfortable, and that's okay because we're human, but try to get that worked out. Resume, LinkedIn, references, all that stuff in order. And as much as you can, and I think Kathy had a speaker a couple of weeks ago about just staying positive, networking. You'll get your next opportunity by someone who opening a door or referring you. So keep that networking going. I know it can be exhausting, but it's really important to build those relationships and lean on people for not only advice, but even for recommendations and or referrals.
Scott, I have another quick question.
Yeah.
This is Kathy. So in your previous slide, you said send thank you letters to the recruiter rather
Mhm.
than sending them directly to the people on the interview team or whatever. If someone does send something directly to the interviewers or the hiring manager, is that frowned upon by recruiters? Does that damage your relationship with a recruiter?
That's a really great question. If you have applied directly to a company, let's just say you applied directly at Dell and you're interviewing with a hiring manager and there's no third party person in between, then yes, do that. It is a little sensitive because basically at Liaison, we hold the relationship. We hold the door between the client and the candidate. And we're not trying to mask anything or protect anything. But if I have a candidate talking directly with my client, we've had that happen before where the client, inadvertently says, oh yeah, great. Can you start work next week? It's like, well, we haven't even gone to job offer yet. Right. So try to understand the relationship that the recruiter has with the group that you're interviewing. What we ask is that you send me the thank you and I will immediately forward that. I will not edit it. I will not spell check it. I will not do anything. I'll immediately send it to the team. So just kind of, figure out what the relationship is and then, act accordingly. So but that's a good question.
So you said figure out what the relationship is. Now, when you deal with somebody, with a job seeker,
Yeah.
do you explain that? In our
Oh,
company, we hold the client relationship, so you send things with us.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing we do with Liaison is we do a lot of assumption busting right up front. When someone applies, and if I think they look like they could be a fit, my first thing when I call them is like, what do you know about Liaison? And Karen and I and Sam, and we've created a document that says, here's Liaison. So you have that in advance. So yeah, we're not trying to be secretive or not transparent, but we do hold that relationship and we do make it very clear, how we work with our clients. And so,
Okay,
yeah.
great. There's another question in the chat. This
Yeah.
person says, and I'm sure she speaks for everyone, I get messages from recruiters all the time, especially on LinkedIn, but also in my email. But it's so much, it feels a bit like spam. It's hard to know who is contacting about a legitimate job. Is there a way to know?
Wow. Yeah, so welcome to my world because when I send out a LinkedIn in-mail, because as recruiters we pay to get an extra tool that we can send a letter looking email to a candidate or someone who's on LinkedIn. And all I can tell you is try to read what the person has written. I mean, we try to share as much as possible to show that we're legit. We do say that we have a full-time ongoing opportunity. We provide a link to the job. I mean, if you don't get a link to the job, if you don't have additional information or you can't find the company, then yeah, that could be kind of squirrely. Yeah, that's hard because there are a lot of people out there and right now, because recruiters and companies need candidates, we are doing tons and tons of passive. We are not waiting for people to apply. We are reaching out on LinkedIn. We are reaching out on Indeed. We are reaching out on Facebook. So all I can say is if it feels like someone's trying to sell you something, like a timeshare or something, I just say go with your gut.
This is kind of just a comment rather than a question, but I'll bring it to you. So she says, I am one of those people that always takes notes. So I find Scott's comments interesting that it breaks connection. I have taken minutes of large meetings and I find it keeps me focused and attentive in meetings, and I'm very interested in what I am listening to. Do you think that, and I understand I've heard comments from both
Yeah.
sides of that.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to, if you want to take notes, to ask and just say, do you mind if I take a few notes during the meeting, during the interview? Is that the approach?
Yeah, that's great. And trust me, there are people out there that are just like the person asking the question, incredibly versed at listening and taking notes. So I'm totally cool with that. And I even thought twice about even mentioning that. But I mean, I will have people, maybe they're not so good, and what they'll do is they'll completely lose eye contact and they'll be off doing something. And I feel like we've broken cadence. I mean, we're trying to establish a connection right up front. What's your communication style? Are you a fit? What have you done in the past? And so, I mean, if it works for you and you can make it work too, and mention at the beginning, that's totally fine. please know that you're not going to get discounted because you're taking notes. It's just sometimes, if it interrupts a conversation, then it could be a little bit of a challenge, but it's not a deal breaker.
But I definitely have heard that as well from recruiters that say that we're just trying to have a conversation, and if you're writing down everything you
Yeah.
say, then it's
Yeah.
distracting.
Well, imagine if I'm meeting you in an elevator and I'm trying to get your elevator pitch, and all of a sudden you pull out some Post-its and start writing things down. It's like, that's okay. Initially, maybe not initially taking notes. I mean, I think what we're doing here initially in the conversation, the first couple of minutes, is we're establishing, it's like, what's your style like? Where have you been? What's our connection? What's that common thread?
Yeah.
How quickly are we going to get to the friend zone?
This is a unique question. You may not have the answer to this. This person says, how about working with foreign or European recruiters or companies who may be establishing U.S. subsidiaries because of GDPR? Any thoughts on or experience with the differences in this globalized world where people hire and work across borders for international companies? Are their practices different? And if so, how so?
Yeah, well, that's a really great question. I wish I had an answer for that, and I don't. And I guess I can say you just have to do a lot of research and figure out, is the company legit? What does it look like to be employed by a company that has a home office out of, Berlin or something like that, right? I mean, if they have U.S. subsidiaries, maybe that's okay. But yeah, I wish I had the answer to that. I mean, with Liaison, we really can only work with people who are, residents of the United States. We don't have the ability, we don't have the legal team to do sponsorships or things like that. So it's kind of on another side, I'm actually seeing more people from outside of the United States applying for jobs, but they're not eligible to work in the United States. So there could be more competition coming from outside of North America for some of the jobs that are posted. So,
okay, here's a question. Is the right to represent, I know you said that it would only be for that specific job. Is the right to represent only applied to the specific job, which you said, yes, it does. How does right to represent affect anything if you locate a regular job and there's no interaction between you and the contract company? Or in other words, how long does right to represent apply in terms of time?
Yeah. I think that that's a great question, is that right to represent is just a timestamp. It just says you give us permission to submit you for this one specific job with this specific job number. And all we're doing is we're submitting in the system. As soon as you sign a right to represent, it says, I give you permission, and we submit that into our client's system. That date says this person was submitted, on Friday the 13th at 11 p.m. If another candidate gets submitted Friday the 13th at 2 p.m., we supersede that individual. This is not an exclusive representation for you to the end of time. It just says, we can submit you for this one job. And if you find a job,
are all companies like that? Is that
we don't have any right to represent. We don't have any contract language when we work with any of our other clients. This is just with this one specific client, and it's really more of a timestamp. So if anyone ever asks you to sign something, really take a look at it. Now, in our employment agreement with Liaison, we do have something that says that you will not go to work for the company that we put you in touch with for like a year. So if you were to leave as a Liaison employee serving our client and then go work for them directly 6 months later, you can't do that because we've developed a relationship. We've made that connection. But that's not right to represent. So.
Okay, here's a question. I am sure you do forward thank you notes onto a hiring manager or interviewer, but how can I be sure that another recruiter will do so? Would it be proper for me to send a thank you note to a hiring manager or interviewer and then let the recruiter know that I have done so?
Sure. I mean, again, it's what I said earlier about, what is the relationship that they have with the client? How comfortable do you feel with them? I mean, you don't ever want to do an end run on somebody, right? And if you don't trust the recruiter, then I think that's a problem right to begin with, right? But I developed a relationship with them. I mean, they want it to be successful. I don't think anyone's going to hold that back because it's going to make the recruiter look bad. So I would just work with them and find out what is their preferred process for that. And they may say, yeah, just send it directly. That's fine. So.
Yeah, especially if a company like yours has said ahead of time, we are the holder of the client, and so you will
Yeah.
go through us. And then
Yeah.
if somebody disregards that and goes around, I would assume that you would not want to do business with that candidate again if they've done that. I
Yeah,
would
probably.
assume if
Again,
there's
we're
a
not trying to
breach of
be,
trust.
yeah, we're not trying to be secretive or not being transparent. It's just, it's how the communication path goes. So,
Um, this person says the idea of thank you notes seems very artificial and awkward to me. How do you do this without it being weird?
when I say thank you note, I mean, it can be an email. It doesn't have to be something you write and mail. Um, and if it's not your personal style and it goes against how you are and how you present yourself and what you feel, then don't do it. It's there's a human engagement that happens here, and what's happened with the recruiting side, I mean, like the question that happened earlier, someone said, I don't know if this is legit, I'm getting pinged by recruiters, and so Liaison's constantly in this struggle of showing that we're here, we're human, we're transparent. Karen and I and our recruiting team are not on commission. You need to do what's right for you. This is not, I mean, everything I shared with you today, if it's not you, then don't do it, right? I mean, you have to do what you feel represents you, your brand, and your communication style. And there are some companies, it's like, okay, so what? They sent me a thank you note. I just know that I appreciate it, and I know that some of my clients will maybe even use that as a hiring decision, whether or not an individual engaged at that level. So, you just have to be authentic. You have to be, you, and if it's not you, that's totally cool.